Welcome to the Good Growing Podcast. I am Chris Enroth, horticulture educator with University of Illinois Extension, coming at you from Macomb, Illinois. And we have got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking with Chris Lueking all about cut flowers. It's a lot of fun. It's something I've always wanted to get into, and I'm excited to speak with her today. And you know I'm not doing this by myself. I am joined, as always, every week by horticulture educator Ken Johnson in Jacksonville. Hey, Ken.
Hello, Chris. You enjoying the warmer weather?
I kind of am. I don't know. I really enjoyed that cold snap that we just had, simply because of the fact that the surface of the soil froze and I didn't have to mop the floor at least like 2 days this last week. So that was great. Now we're back to mopping, and people are just tracking mud in nonstop, it seems like, this time of year. How was the warm weather in your neck of the woods? Or sorry, the cold weather. What are you feeling?
It was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to have cold weather like we're supposed to. And this week I did get some yard work done. We moved some mulch, which was frozen. So that was fun. But got our mulch pile moved, and I'll have to order some more now.
You mean the composting process isn't keeping that mulch pile nice and steamy warm?
No, it is. It was pretty well composted in areas. Those some of it we just put into the garden because it was pretty much no longer mulch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have been keeping an eye on the daffodils we have a daffodil right in front of our office here in Macomb, and I've just been watching it. It's been up since like mid-February, and today, what is it, March 21st, the tips of the yellow petals are just starting to break open the flower buds. So we're about to have daffodils in bloom here in Macomb. Do you see anything in Jacksonville yet?
A lot of houses that have them on the south side of the house, they've been bloomed for over a week now. The ones I have in my yard, they're on the north side of our house, so they're a little bit cooler location. They're up, and they've got flower stalks are up, and the buds are starting to show yellow. And I think some of the ones we have are a little bit later varieties too. But yeah, at home we should have them here pretty soon. And throughout Jacksonville, we've got daffodils here and there, full bloom.
Well, that will be exciting. I'm excited to see also your tulip display this coming spring, because I know you have quite the assortment of tulips along your front walkway. So I've seen a couple pictures, and I'm looking forward to seeing more.
Hopefully they'll come back up, and the squirrels haven't yet all of them. And we do have a few gaps. Most of them come up, but we do have a few gaps where there used to be tulips. So I don't know if they're late, bulbs died, or something ate them, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm looking forward to that. And speaking of flowers, I think this is a prime segue to introduce our guest for today. We're going to be talking about cut flowers with horticulture educator Chris Lueking. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you guys for having me today.
Well, we are happy to have you. And just so everyone knows where you're located, we cover a couple of counties, but you primarily work out of Marion County in Salem, Illinois, correct?
Correct. And we've had daffodils in bloom for 2 weeks now. So we're definitely a little bit warmer than you guys have been. So we did have a dusting of snow Saturday, but we've got flowers in bloom.
Oh, and I've heard from other people that have been traveling down into Southern Illinois, even far like South Illinois, that it's been spring there for a while now. So I'm a little jealous, a little happy I'm still up in Northern Illinois. Can't really decide for myself. So Chris, today we are talking about cut flowers, which is something I've always been interested in, because my wife has always said, your job is to grow plants. Why are you never bringing flowers home or flowers inside? It's like, well, I've never had a good opportunity to grow these flowers for you. So I'm excited to talk about this topic today. So Ken, would you mind kicking us off with our line of questions for Chris, please?
I can do that. So I guess our first question is kind of how did you get started in growing cut flowers? Why did you want to, and what was the process for you getting started?
Well, I had grandmothers and my mother, we always had a flower garden, right? In the front walkway, and in the garden, we always had zinnias and marigolds and everything growing. But I took a class with the beginning fruit and vegetable farmers with Illinois Extension. It was actually located, it was a grant for the Illinois beginning fruit and vegetable farmers at Dixon Springs. And I attended one Saturday a month for a whole year. So it was a commitment to drive down. For me, it was a 2-hour drive to Dixon Springs. We had local educators there, hort educators and commercial ag educators that kind of talked about how you got started with a beginning business like that. And so I thought it would be interesting to go ahead and do cut flowers. My husband thought it'd be great to do vegetables, but I wanted to do flowers. And so we compromised a little bit. I actually applied after taking the classes and learning about business plans and insurance and the EQIP loan. I actually applied for an EQIP loan, which I received money towards my high tunnel. I put up a 30 by 72 high tunnel, a poly structure high tunnel. And in that, we decided that we would do half of it in cut flowers and half of it in vegetables. I had visited the farmer's market and kind of had done a little research on what would sell, and we did not have a cut flower vendor in Mount Vernon, Illinois. And we decided that that might be a viable option to diversify a little bit.
I know a lot of growers that have used that EQIP loan to help them to get started in some type of a specialty market, whether it's cut flowers, vegetables, hydroponics, really interesting. So I think that's great. Now, I don't quite remember, is the EQIP loan, is that through NRCS? Is that the organization?
Is, yes. And it takes you time. So along with that, we had to first do a conservation plan. It's not overnight. Mm-hmm. So immediately, no, it's going to take, it was a 2-year process to go through we had, they come out, the soil scientists came out, they looked and wrote a conservation plan. I actually, along with getting the high tunnel, I put in a pollinator strip, which mine's an L for Lueking, mm-hmm. Of course. I always laugh about that, but it really was an L shape. We put in native plants, and it was for pollinators, for bees and all the pollinators. And so we put natives in along with it. So we created this conservation plan to kind of mitigate any runoff that we would have coming off of the tunnel structure.
And you had mentioned you're going to the Mount Vernon market. Is your farm, you said your office is in Salem with Extension, but is your farm, is that close to Mount Vernon, or is that located somewhere else? Okay.
It is. We actually live in Woodlawn, Illinois, which is 5 miles east of Mount Vernon. So that market is closer to our farm.
Okay. That's really interesting. I think that's pretty fascinating. We haven't really even gotten into the cut flowers yet, but now you're like, oh, I have pollinator strips, and I'm like, ooh, I wonder what kind of flower she has in there. So, Chris, is there anything specific? Now, was it NRCS that decided on your mix for the pollinator strip, or were you able to tailor maybe some things?
I kind of tailored it a little bit because I worked with Pheasants and Forever. Mm-hmm. On some of their mixes that they use for wildlife to kind of just, they have certain mixes that are more for ground cover, and I wanted a variety of plants that would be a mix to go through there. So we have, part of it too is that there's a wet strip on one end of it. So I wanted some wet pollinators that would be wet plants that would go in there that, like our swamp milkweed and rattlesnake master and cardinal flower that would do well in that wet little low area.
Ken, I think it's time for a road trip. She hasn't even gotten in the cut flowers, and I want to see this.
Live on location.
Okay, so you applied for the EQIP grant. You had got a high tunnel. You split that 50-50 veggies, cut flowers. Now, let's say I'm maybe a startup commercial operation, or maybe I'm just a home backyard grower who's really wants to just have cut flowers around all the time at the home and share with family and friends. Beyond that high tunnel, what other equipment do we need, or Is there anything special we need to consider before we even start getting seeds in the ground?
Right. So what I really had to look at is location. I wanted to have 6 to 8 hours of sun, right? Because you're going to have plenty of sun. So you have those nice, strong, tall stems. If you have shady locations, you have to have varieties that's going to tolerate that. But I definitely we are in Southern Illinois, so we have a lot of clay. So we had to amend our soils. So we had to add some compost to get our, area. So it wasn't compacted as much as maybe we have in Central Illinois. So we had to definitely look at our site location. We had to make sure we had sun. The other big key thing was water source, right? I don't want to have to carry water to everything. So we wanted to make sure we ran some water lines. We do have drip irrigation, but I also do have a storage, like almost like a rain barrel that I collect water off one of our barns that I use around also in some of my perennial beds. So.
And that makes me think of, oh, what a benefit growing cut flowers and maybe not necessarily edible crops with that harvested rainwater. Do you treat it, or do you need to do anything with it, or can you just use that straight out of the cistern or the storage what am I trying to say, tank?
Yeah, so we have it's like a big range shuttle type of tank that I use, and that I use strictly on a perennial bed because I have a large. When I say perennial bed, it's probably larger than some people. So it's about 25 by 70. So it's a pretty large bed, perennial area. But it's because I tend to want everything. I'm like every flower grower, you have a new variety come out, you want to plant it. And so we just made a really large perennial bed and I utilize it there.
Sounds like you have the perennial bed.
Right. So we have a perennial bed and then we have so we also have an area designated. So if you're just going to do your garden and you just want to add zinnias or pro cut flowers to your garden, we just want to make sure that you can make rows of flowers that you can have. You can add those to your garden. So I guess the best way to do it is to designate an area. You want to use plant spacing. You can use the fiber strips if you want to put down landscape fabric and burn holes in them and plant it out by 6 by 6 spacings. But you don't even need equipment. I mean, as long as you have a broad fork and you have an area that's been tilled up, or you broad forked up that area, you can plant pro cut sunflowers in just rows. We do 36-inch rows, and we plant them 4 to 6 inches apart. And what we do is we'll do a set of 3 rows. 3 to 4, depending on what variety of sunflower we have. But we like to do the pro cuts and just allow a smaller spacing between them. And that way, then you don't have to worry about having a lot of equipment. You may want to run drip irrigation lines down them if you need a water, to add that water. But if you don't, it still will allow you to hand water that space without having a lot of other equipment. So that's probably one of the easiest ways to get started, is using either a pro cut sunflower, or if you don't want to have to cut multiple times at a long length of it, and you want them to last a little longer in your garden, you could do a branching variety, and then you just need more space between them. Then you'd want to spread those out to 9 inches apart, so that you allow time for it to space and branch out and grow, or even further. You may even want to go to 12 to 18 inches, depending on the variety, what the seed recommendation packet would say. But if you do what we like to do is, in our garden spacing, we'll take and we'll put those rows. So we'll take sunflowers and put down in 36-inch rows and space them 6 inches apart. Then we might come back, have enough space that we can have a walking path between them. And then we'll do rows of zinnias. And now our zinnias we'll put close together. We'll put a double row and we'll plant them down. And that allows them to grow, but also have, as they grow, kind of overtake any weeds that are coming up. And that way, then you don't have to till and you don't have to go down them and like down in each individual row. We'll kind of space them together, and we don't have to add a netting to them because they kind of support each other that way. So it takes over the weeds, they mitigate any weeds, and they also branch out and fill up your space.
Is this going in your high tunnel, or are you just doing this?
This is in
Oh.
field crop. Yeah, so we have two different approaches. We plant, so our high tunnel is for season extension, that we plant early varieties, and we also plant, we've kind of moved away from zinnias in there until like a later succession in the fall. We don't do that early summer because you can go those outside in our field crop area. So we'll use that there. We'll go ahead and plant a late succession zinnias in the tunnel and hold those into our fall bouquets. And that way, then what we typically have seen is in our humidity in Southern Illinois, what we have is we'll have some powdery mildew issues with zinnias. And so we don't want to plant them too soon and have them have to go through the whole summer. We'll wait till a fall planting.
How you mentioned that season extension aspect, how far can you push that season into the winter? Would you have cut flowers in like December?
We don't go all the way quite to December with cuts. We have gone to November for Thanksgiving bouquets. We've had mums and we grow in our tunnel, which we didn't talk about yet, but we grow eucalyptus. And so we'll use our eucalyptus, we'll save it and we'll cover it with some agribon, and we'll hold those all the way until the end of November. We will go ahead and cut it when we start seeing temperatures dropping down into the 30s, because we seem to have some stem and leaf foliage damage with the cool weather. But we'll have mums. Sometimes we'll have zinnias if we have them late in there. We may have lysianthus, or we might even have late dahlias that we're holding, and that we've been kind of covering, that we'll have all the way. We had all the way up until November 26th this year, we were cutting out the tunnel. So they can withstand the frost, right? But they just can't withstand those night temperatures getting so low.
You've kind of talked about this a little bit, but so if you had to pick 5 flowers, probably like picking your favorite kid, but
Yeah.
what are kind of your I guess your top 5 or your kind of 5 go-to cut flowers?
So for our field crops to go out and have, so anybody could do in the summer, plant these in their garden. You can plant these in containers, plant them in your existing flower beds. My top 5, absolutely, zinnia is one of my top choices. I mean, there's so many color varieties. There's the large, varieties that you can get, the state fair varieties. You can get the tiny little Timbalinas. They have the peach varieties. There's also all the limes now and multicolored ones, candy cane, cactus varieties. So zinnias, absolutely, because they're come and cut again. The more you cut on them, the more you can enjoy them because they'll come back. Typically, they're great at direct seeding. You don't have to have any special seed starting equipment, anything for them. They're pretty hardy. They'll last. Like I said, the only issue, they're pretty disease and pest resistant. The only issue I've ever seen is occasionally Japanese beetles like them, and you will have some powdery mildew issues later into the season, and that's typically your August for us into October before we start seeing any issues. So you can, through the middle of summer, you're going to enjoy them for a long time. The next one I would say would definitely be sunflowers. I love all the different varieties of sunflowers. There's the little teddy bear sunflowers that are 24 inches tall all the way to Pikes Peak ones. But I would say the pro cuts, if you're going to do cut flowers or you want to bring them in even to enjoy them, your pro cut pollenless sunflowers. Pollenless, because if you get the pollen variety, what happens? You cut them and then that pollen drops after 2 days, right? And so you have that yellow pollen all over your table and everyone's upset about that. So we recommend, if you're going to do cuts, to bring in to go with the pollenless varieties. They're still a great, nectar source for the bees. It's just that they're not dropping that pollen inside your house. So I would say pick a pollenless variety, try any of them. There's red varieties, there's plums, there's so many different ones. Moulin Rouge is a new one. It's just a lot of fun to do. My third choice for anyone that's just starting out, I would definitely say Cosmos is a great one. They have the single petal ones, they have double clicks. They have an apricot lemonade one. It's a new variety out. They have so many different color shades and they've hybridized those. They have this really pretty foliage too that we like to use when we're doing bouquet work. They're very airy. It almost has it's split foliage that looks like dill or fennel. It's a very airy and really fun bouquet that to add to it as a foliage too. So when you're making bouquets for in the house, I would say the next one that I really enjoy and it's real easy to grow would be Gomphrena. So you've seen them where they've called them strawberry fields or the little ones that they've had. They're reds, there's whites, there's pinks. We like to use those because not only are they good through the summer, but then you can take those and dry those. And so they hold their color. They're pretty true to holding color. Even if they dry out, they still look really nice. They don't fall over and turn brown and wilt. They still look nice in your bouquet in the house. So you can kind of push it. If you happen to not be one of those that want to throw your flowers out, they still have a good color. And then probably of my top 5, for beginners to use and do, I would pick a Celosia. I love coxcomb. There's so many varieties. There's a plume kind that's long. It's got long stalks to them. Of course, everyone loves the crested combs, and they look like there's persimmon and red, and they're just a lot of fun for everyone to grow. They look like little brains. My kids say they look like brains. They look like a rooster comb, but they always like them around, the holidays, and they go, oh, look, there's brains all everywhere, when they're little. So they're fun. And I think everyone enjoys those. Those are just they're tried and true. They're pretty hardy. Once they get established, they kind of take over and they do well. They take drought pretty well too. So that's another thing. I like to use things that are drought tolerant, because if they get a little bit that you have to wait to water them. I like all of these varieties because they're drought tolerant.
This is an amazing list, and I need to order more seed now. I don't know if I'm going to be too late. Chris, is this? I've done the Cosmos before, and I have had trouble with that one when I started them in flats. They just started twisting and weaving all over into each other. Are you doing this inside under grow lights in the high tunnel, or do you direct seed out into your beds?
So we will start some of our Zinnia seed as our first succession planting in the tunnel, just to start them. I don't always use grow lights for them because the tunnel is pretty filtered light, and I'll get them started. I'll just start them in April and let them go. But I direct seed. All of these things can be direct seeded out into your garden, and they will do fine. I typically won't do Cosmos in seed starting trays. I'll just direct seed them. They're really good about that. There's so many varieties that you need, and we can go into, those cool season, cold hardy crops. So our cool flowers, some of those are things that I'll start in fall and hold them over and have them for spring blooms. But right now, these are all things that anyone can do and not have any equipment.
And yes, I learned my lesson with Cosmos, and from now on, that's getting directly seeded into the garden. So
yeah,
yes.
So you mentioned powdery mildew. So if you have a pest disease outbreak, how do you handle that, since you're growing flowers, and spraying that can get a little dicey depending on what you're spraying?
Yeah, typically because like I said, we have pollinators, and I love leafcutter bees, and I tolerate probably a lot more insect pressure on the foliage and things like that. Powdery mildew typically doesn't bother us until late fall. So I typically don't treat that. That's just something that I know is going to occur in fall, and then I'm going to just discard those flowers. I have had an aphid outbreak in the tunnel, and I've had whiteflies in the tunnel one time. And those, it's really monitoring. I put up the little yellow sticky traps, and we'll monitor to see what the pressure is. We have turned loose ladybug larvae, and we have green lacewings that I've noticed that's just naturally there because of having a lot of our pollinators outside of our tunnel. So we try to attract those beneficials. But if I do have an outbreak of something that I can't control biologically, I will target just that, try to target that and spray the foliage. Now, if we've already started in bloom, then we might just have to discard that and cut it, and we don't sell the blooms, because if you have, I don't want to sell you the blooms that have aphids on it to take into your house, right? That would be just something that we wouldn't want to do. So you might have a loss there. I will tell you one pest that it kind of drives me crazy is snapdragons is another one that we grow. And we will start them in the tunnel, a rocket series, which gets really long stems, and then they'll have side shoots that'll come additionally. So we'll harvest that first stalk of snapdragon, and then you have those side shoots that are growing. Well, it never fails that I seem to always have the buckeye caterpillars that are going to be your buckeye butterfly that actually come in, and those caterpillars use snapdragons as their host plant, and they end up usually shredding all my foliage and then on that second one. So we've learned, that you can target it. Is it worth it to me? If I need it for an event, I might go ahead and target that, that caterpillar, but I know they're going to eventually show up. So I tolerate what I can of it. And I think that's, and then we just let them go ahead and complete their life cycle. And I know I'm going to get some side shoots that'll come up later. So I kind of just let that go. But it is a challenge as a flower farmer, but also having bees and things I don't want to spray, along with that too, because that's also, can cause damage in the long run for me.
That's a good point, because when you're growing vegetables, just the vegetable has to look good. The plant could look terrible, but you're selling the plant, or at least the part of the plant, and so it needs to look presentable. It's got to be something people want to put in the middle of their dinner table and sit and look at while they're eating. So yeah, that would be very challenging, I would think, that balance between keeping that plant nice and maybe not as eaten on as much, and then having to control some insects. I'll say I have gotten quite a few cut flowers, and think like my wife would comment like, "Oh, the leaf is really shiny," and you like touch it and it's sticky, like, "Oh, that's honeydew. It's aphid poop." So yeah, that's fine. I am curious, Chris, what is happening right now in the cut flower garden? Do you have any harvest going on? Or are you ramping up for the spring?
Yes. So right now we are actually harvesting. We had tulips that we had started in the high tunnel. So they're the specialty double tulips and parrot tulips. So we're harvesting some of those right now. We have our cool season flowers that are growing. So we have some bells of Ireland that are starting to grow for foliage. We have some larkspur that's growing. We have different things planted kind of coming along, but they're not quite in bloom yet. We even, and then we're also getting in, transitioning in like our plants that are going to be put into the tunnel in rows. We had covered our eucalyptus. So we have some fresh that's coming in. That'll be the first year planting, but then we have some that we tried to cover with agribon that will cut off any damaged parts of it and then let it get started. I have jewels of opar that are starting to bud up. We have in the tunnel that we overwintered some cut mums, and they're kind of starting to see some growth to them going on. We have alliums that are growing. So there's quite a bit of life. We also plant lettuce and radishes for our personal use in there. So we've harvested, both of those crops. But then along with that, we have peonies outside that we had to cover because of the cold snap.
Oh, yeah.
We got down to 22 the other night, and so it's not very pretty right now, but we had covers and buckets over things. They're about 8 inches tall, and so I'm like covering with buckets so that I don't have damage. But I think it's part of that. We're starting to see some new growth on some of the roses, and our I guess it was I did see the flowering almond that had some buds, and then also some of our lilacs have buds that are going. So, that fluctuation of being those cold nights, we might see a little bit of damage occur. But you can't cover everything, right? We know that's the give and take of it a little bit. We know that there's going to be a little bit of cool season damage that happens, but the cool flowers typically will tolerate it, and they'll do fine. They'll just kind of, as long as they're covered with a little bit of agribon, which is a row cover, the white row covers. If you don't know what that means, it's a white row cover. We use that and they do well.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about like foliage, because, maybe it's just me, but I think cut flowers, I think a lot of times people overlook the foliage plants and how, those can be added to bouquets and stuff. So what would, as you've mentioned some, but what are some different, the foliage, the plants are just growing for foliage, not necessarily for the flowers?
So the first one, absolutely, we love basils, believe it or not. Lemon basil and cinnamon basil. We love, so there's a chocolate mint. Mint's another one that sometimes we'll use for foliage with it. We'll also grow, so later on will be like our bells of Ireland is more of a foliage, but it does have the bells to it. But we'll use mahogany splendor. So it's actually a hibiscus, but it's got a real burgundy color foliage to it. We use 9-bark, so we'll use a lot of shrubs. So we'll use our 9-bark. So there's lots of varieties, right? You got those lime colored leaves of your 9-bark, but then you also have those burgundy, shades of some of those. So there's lots of different ones that we'll kind of use for our foliage end of it. We'll also use dill. Like I said, it's kind of like the Cosmo look to it, our bronze fennel. It has that anise smell to it. We'll use some fennels and some dills early in the season if we need something. Another great one is sedum. So if you have sedum that's growing, and lamb's ears, another one, those are ones that are perennials that come back. We'll cut them early in season, especially around Mother's Day if we need a little bit of a green filler, because your sedum, as it usually like your stone crop, as it gets larger, and it's not going to bloom until fall and it kind of spans out, we can cut a few of those leaves, stems off, and you still have a really nice shape to it, and you just reduce that bulk, and we'll use that as a foliage.
You have the most diverse farm.
We have a little bit of everything. I think I'm a hoarder, actually.
Plant hoarder. Yep. That's so neat. Okay. Can I ask about eucalyptus? Because
yes,
you had mentioned that a few times. It sounds like you're trying to perennialize it with the agribon. Does that work well, or do you have to replant every year?
Okay. So we are in zone 6B. 6A, we're right there. Mount Vernon's is 6A, so we're real close to that 6A line. So I'm pushing the envelope a little bit, right? I am perennializing it somewhat. We have found that the baby blue variety of eucalyptus, that we've covered it with the agribon. We typically will cut it back to 2 to 3 foot tall and then cover it all winter. And we've held. So we did one planting and it's lasted 4 years now. We're going on the 5th season to see. Now, I will say we got down to -24 this winter. And so I'm really scared that this year might be the year that got it.
Mhm, mhm.
We've not had it in December, around Christmas. We got down to -20s for 2 to 3 days there in a row. So I'm not sure. Typically before that, the temperatures hadn't been that low and we could cover it and utilize it. But if not, we plant every year additional varieties and new starts into the tunnel. Our first year plants typically will get anywhere from 3 to 4 foot tall in the tunnel, and we'll harvest them late fall. We'll do side branches and then we'll harvest down in the bulk of it in fall. But our established that was going on 3 years, 4 years old, it got to be anywhere from 17 foot to 20 foot tall in our high tunnel. So we had, it loved it. It had plenty of, we had grown them in raised beds in our tunnel. So we had reduced the compaction for them. They got a good established roots and they loved that compost, and boy, they took off. And they had a good base to them. And then we cut all the side branches off of them. We have seen that the baby blue variety does the best, but we have also grown, we've had multiple varieties. We've had the Nikolai and silver drop, they call it. So we had multiple varieties going, more the willow looking type of eucalyptus opposed to the round circles. We've had a little bit of everything that we've tried. The thing, they do not like to be direct seeded. You have to get them seed started or buy the plugs in. That's one thing. We've not been able to go from seed straight to a lush plant. They do need a little more care. So I think it'd probably be worth it. Either you invest in the seed, which was hard to find there with the wildfires and everything going on, or order in the plugs. And the plugs typically run anywhere from $2 to $3 a plug, a little plant. So, and they're tiny little things when they come in. So they're usually less than an inch tall when you're planting them, and you get kind of nervous and scared.
Be careful with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the idea of pushing the envelope. I've planted crepe myrtle, and it's grown at least in my parents' home in Quincy, Illinois, for over a decade now. And winters, like you described, mid-20s, it'll die back to the ground, but it pops right back up. Chris, let me just maybe throw another weird thing on your radar as something that I have, just because of work, have had to learn more about. Tea. It is quite a foliage plant. It's a camellia. Not really a remarkable flower, but hey, wouldn't it be cool? Like, here's a cut flower bouquet, and you can brew tea once you dry these leaves out.
Yeah,
or
there you go.
I don't know. This sounds like you have a lot of edible stuff in your bouquet or in your cut flower mixtures. So not saying that you want people to eat all this stuff, but I'm just now my brain is
okay. Now it's going to be a new one. I'm going to have to try it.
Yep.
Well, I talked to Ken about cotton. I thought that would be a cool one to add. We have not done that. I will say that I did get some tobacco leaf seed to try to grow some tobacco leaves, only because I just wanted to try it as something new. Like every year we try something new just to see how it's going to do it. My kids say, I don't really get flowers. You would think a cut flower farmer had flowers in their house. Usually it's experiments of how long will this last in base life, and I have single things and don't touch because I'm trying to see how long that's going to last in that cup of water, So I think it's definitely, I think we always are experimenting with something new. So I have not tried that tea, so I'm thinking that might be a new one. So
what's your new stuff for this year then?
So this year it's just new varieties, I think. So we did the Cosmos. We have this it's called apricot lemonade. That's a new variety for us. I have actually, I'm saying new as in I've got some new varieties of David Austin roses that we haven't grown in our area. So they're more of a climbing rose. So we're going to try a couple new varieties of that. We also we have hydrangeas, so we'll do different varieties. Of course, you always do the Annabelles, and because it's really close, they do really well here in Southern Illinois. We do different varieties, so we'll always try a new variety of anything that's out. But I don't know if I really picked anything that I have a new one of yet this year, other than just the different colors that we're trying to do on varieties. I have so many. That's the one thing with beginners, right? We always want everything. And I would recommend that, doing something really well first and learning how they react and how they're going to grow. Because typically I'll try things, 3 times. So I'll try it the first year and see, okay, was it something I did and it died and it didn't do well? Or was it environmental issue or a pest issue? And so I'll try it a second year. And if it doesn't do well, then by the 3rd year, I'm like, okay, is it worth my time and energy to continue this? Or is it really going to be effective? If I can grow basil for that foliage instead that we can also eat or use it, is it better for me to just use that and not worry about it? So I think that's the thing. As I've learned, I always try something that might be, we're thinking, okay, I had done Celosia. It's more of a Central Illinois. They've done that as a cover crop. I tried it for me early and I actually put out some seed. So I guess that's my one new thing. It would be Celosia. I have it in the high tunnel, but I wanted it as an early bloomer and more for the foliage, just because it's really got a cool texture, with that, as it's purple and it's laying over. I thought that might be a cool new texture in our spring bouquets. So I think it's just, kind of figuring out what works well for you and what you do well, and then to continue in that process.
Well, that is some great advice. I think we say that a lot to people interested in either starting a business or maybe starting something new in the garden, is start small. Chris, I have heard that 3-strike policy kind of with other farmers and growers, like, we're going to give this 3 chances and we're going to document each year or each time we grow this, good, dud, and why, and can we do that some other way that might be more economical. So I fantastic advice for anyone wanting to get started in cut flower commercially or cut flower for fun. This has been a lot of great information today, and I bet listeners, you're probably yelling at us like, what about harvest and holding these flowers for periods of time in a vase? And we will get to that at a future show. We have to have Chris on later on and talk about harvesting flowers, arranging bouquets, and getting them to last, or maybe even drying them. There's a lot that we still have to talk about. We have to cut it off for today. Chris, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate your time and sharing your other part of your other job of cut flower farming. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Well, the Good Growing Podcast is a production of University of Illinois Extension, edited this week by me, Chris Enroth. And a special thanks to Ken Johnson for hanging out once again, another week under the belt, Ken, chatting about gardening.
Yes, thank you, Chris Lueking, for being on. I learned a lot, and one of these days I'll get my act together and attempt to grow cut flowers, or we grow most of them already, but actually
shower our spouses in cut flowers.
Yeah, so take care of them so they can be cut flowers. And Chris, as always, thank you. And let's do this again next week.
Oh, we shall do this again next week. It's going to be a question and answer show, folks. So we have more spring gardening questions that are coming in. If you do have them, our emails are in the show notes below. We are happy to answer these in email or on air, whatever you would prefer. Well, listeners, thank you for doing what you do best, and that is listening. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, watching. And as always, keep on growing.